Central Indian, you might call it. So I don't give a damn about this northern. And my wife is a Punjabi, by the way, and with my mother-in-law from Dera Ghazi Khan. So I'm quite aware of this sort of nonsense across the dinner table. But the point to make very simply is this. We've lost the unitary space. How do you regain it? For 30 years, I've been advocating a very simple way of doing it. And in all my books, and therefore these are things that upset people, bureaucrats, and there are vested interests now that have grown around policy positions in the military, in the MEA, all over in the Indian government, in the intelligentsia, and so on, and in our business classes, which is that the point I've advocated is, first of all, you have to begin to address the lack of trust of all our neighbors. This is something that Pramit would join me in confirming. Not one neighbor is friendly to India. There's a reason for it. We tend to be pro-consular in our attitude to our neighbors. But you bring in a slightly consequential power like China into the picture, and we have our tails between our legs. And that's the honest truth. This is not how you gain respect. Pakistan, I've said you can remove all the army from the western border and the Pakistanis can't do a damn thing. Cannot do a damn thing. I've suggested remove unilaterally the nuclear-tipped missiles out of our western border as a unilateral measure to gain trust. Remove most of the, I've said, again, in official records, I was advisor defense expenditure to the 10th Finance Commission India. It's not a statutory body, it's a constitutional body. And because it's now 20 years old, I can say it, I suppose there's nothing classified about it anymore, is that, and because the army is moving towards, in some sense, I said demobilize the three-strike course, which to any Pakistani, to any sensible Pakistani, would be extremely threatening. Especially because you can't ever use it now with the Pakistanis getting the nuclear weapons from China, courtesy China. So, if you're not going to ever use the three-strike course, why are they there? Which takes up, in my analysis from those times, and it's not very different now, the arithmetic is the same virtually, which takes up 26% of our defense budget. That's an enormous waste. Sure, you want to protect yourself against a Pakistan contingency? Sure, do it. Have one rationalized, compromised, I call it a composite core. It's in great detail, it's there in my writings. You have composite core, more than enough for any Pakistan contingency. But otherwise, get on with the business. As to the terrorism issue that everybody gets worked up about, and Vikram Sood is here, former RAW chief, I'm sorry, but I mean, here I would perhaps have disagreed with Vikram over the years. Pakistan, to the extent that it utilizes an asymmetric means of discomfiting India, it will, as a weaker power. And I have said that is so because Pakistanis, in some sense, as co-legatees of Arthashastra and Kautilya, are better practitioners of Chanakyan politics than we are. What does Kautilya say vis-a-vis undermining a superior power, adversary that you face? Use asymmetric means, like terrorism. I mean, Kautilya doesn't say. What he does say is, use any means to discomfit your stronger adversary. Now, sure, okay, you want to do, if Mr. Sood's raw agency has to be given a task and they want to undermine Pakistan, Balochistan, okay, go ahead and do it. This is what Arthashastra says as Kuta Yuddha, covert warfare. Don't talk about it. And by the way, most superior nations always have covert warfare, prosecute covert warfare even against their best friends. Are we aware that the most intensive Central Intelligence Agency operations were against which country? Britain. Do you know that? The best Langotia Ayars, transatlantic cousins. The biggest counterintelligence biggest intelligence operation mounted by the United States in its history of intelligence operations was against the UK. So let's, again, there was no need for the Prime Minister to, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, speak about Balochistan. They have given away the game. We have to become a little wiser in use of hard power and understand when to speak of things and when not to speak of things. And this is not something to be spoken of.
So what Bharat says, just a moment, what Bharat says is that if you see an elephant getting startled and scared by a mouse, he can bet on it, it is an Indian elephant. Okay. Second point, just coming back, Pramit, because Pakistan question is very important. Is wealth the decisive factor in war? And if yes, how did Alexander defeat Darius, who was far more wealthier? Or you feel other points are also important, like arms and the will to fight, or let me say the craze to fight. This is just to move it forward, and then we come back to the questions. Pramit, quick answer, please.
Well, economics is definitely very important. Without it, you basically don't have the capacity to fight. But it's economics, it's technology, it's the professionalism of your military. And as you correctly said, ultimately it's also about political will. You have to have the will to actually push these things through. And so, yeah, I mean, but economics is a very important part of it, as we, military economists, if you wish, like Gordon Wright and others have pointed out in World War II, one of the things that eventually, the Germans were actually better fighters, man for man, than almost all the Europeans and even the Americans that they took on. They had a much better military tradition and much better military capacity. And when they were fighting equal, 50-50, the Germans would normally win. What eventually overwhelmed them was simply the fact that the huge amount of economic productivity of the Western democracies. By the end of World War II, Britain alone was generating more industrial capacity than Germany was alone, and that didn't even include, of course, the Soviet Union and an enormous American economic machine that came into it. But that's definitely crucial, but it's not the only thing.
Very good point. Tijori is as important as the tank, please.
Two questions. The first one is that clearly China is a bigger threat, and China historically as well as currently has been kind of ringing India through a string of pearls, and the One Belt, One Road initiative is yet another way of, is something which we are not comfortable about. We have managed to get the others also onto our way of thinking regarding the threat from this. So even the developed world thinks about that the counter to this could be an Iran-Afghanistan route, or even from our side, linking up with Iran. Now, even as we are playing with the Americans, with what is currently happening with the Trump administration, how do you see, we playing the Iran card, or do we see potential problems there? That's number one. Number two is a slightly unconventional question, which is China historically, if you see, it's been actually angling for its growth through an investment-led strategy. And a large part of it, like the Japanese had done initially, was investing heavily in infrastructure. The consumer demand didn't probably keep up with the pace. They were seeing signs of slowdown, and that's how they've, one of course has been the tying up of commodities, etc., through investing in overseas markets. Now they're also building infrastructure overseas. Part of it is the security thing, but from an economic perspective, obviously it's a very opaque economy, but do you see this imploding at some point of time? Because the economic fundamentals at some point of time have to work, play as per the economic rules.
Directing it to Pramit, please.
Well, yes, India tries to keep an open door to Iran, to Israel, and to the United States in all of this. And I know, at least when we've talked to the Americans, we've strongly urged them to maintain a relationship with the Iranians. And in the case of Trump, that has failed. Under Obama, he was interested in a nuclear deal. We'll see. There's still a hope that the nuclear deal will survive, but we have to see what happens on that. irrespective of what happens on that front, India will continue to engage and is continuing to engage with Iran and trying to set and has revived one more time the north-south corridor. But the Chabahar port is now actually physically active. It's actually building. We actually do have a link at least to Afghanistan. The north-south corridor is a much more complicated thing because that will go all the way up into Central Asia, and we'll see how far. I'm skeptical about the north-south corridor, but I would also argue that it's not as important as it used to be. The mineral and oil and gas resources of Central Asia, in a world really aflush with oil and gas, are not that big a deal anymore. And anyway, China's presence in Central Asia is now so overwhelming, there's not all that much I think we can do there. And I would prefer that we focus more on the Indian Ocean area. The second question was on, the Belt Road Initiative. Now, the Belt Road Initiative has been interesting. I've been trying to monitor this along with a number of other people. And for me, it's about finance right now. China is very good at arguing, and Sun Tzu is very clear on this, that you defeat your enemy through getting into his mind. Fighting is really your last resort, and because fighting really is just is a sign that you failed. Power really lies in the ability to exert control without actually using military power at all. And the Chinese have recognized they have two very powerful capacities. One is to build infrastructure, and the other is that they have huge amounts of money. And so in the Belt Road Initiative,